The late afternoon sun hung low over the highway, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt parking lot of Blackstone Bar. It was the kind of place most people drove past without a second glance. A weathered building with faded paint, neon beer signs, flickering in the windows, and rows of motorcycles lined up like metal soldiers standing guard. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of leather, motor oil, and decades of cigarette smoke that had soaked into the wooden walls. The jukebox in the corner played an old Johnny Cash song, barely audible over the low rumble of conversation. Men and women in black leather vests adorned with patches sat at scarred wooden tables, some playing cards, others nursing cold beers, all of them carrying the weight of roads traveled and stories untold. This wasn't a tourist stop. This wasn't a place where families came for dinner. This was biker territory, the home of the Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club, a brotherhood forged in loyalty, respect, and a code older than any law written in books. These weren't criminals. They were mechanics, veterans, construction workers, truck drivers, people who worked with their hands and lived by their word. They asked for nothing from the world except to be left alone to ride free. But what walked through that heavy wooden door on that quiet Thursday afternoon wasn't another rider coming in for a drink. It was a child. An 8-year-old boy, barefoot, trembling, with a black eye swelling purple and fresh, and tears streaming down his dirt-streaked face. The door swung shut behind him with a creak that seemed to echo forever. The bar went completely silent. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. Every beer bottle froze halfway to lips. Card games halted. Even the jukebox seemed to fade into the background, as if the universe itself knew something sacred was happening. 50 pairs of eyes turned toward that small, broken figure standing in the doorway. The boy stood there, chest heaving, fists clenched at his sides, his torn Spider-Man t-shirt hanging off one shoulder. His bare feet were covered in dirt and small cuts. His right eye was nearly swollen shut, the skin around it an angry mixture of purple, blue, and yellow. But it was his eyes, the one good eye that could still open fully, that told the real story. It wasn't just pain, it was terror. It was desperation. It was the look of someone who had run out of options and was making one last, desperate plea for help. His lips trembled as he tried to speak, his small voice barely more than a whisper. But in that dead silence, every word rang out like a church bell. My dad hits me. Then his knees buckled, and he collapsed onto the worn wooden floor, sobbing. If you believe in protecting the innocent, in standing up when no one else will, and that real strength means defending those who can't defend themselves. Stop right now and hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel. Share this story with everyone you know. Because what happens next will restore your faith that heroes still exist, and they don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear leather and ride steel horses. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Because courage, compassion, and justice have no borders. They live in the hearts of people who refuse to look away when someone needs help. Now let's continue, because this story is just beginning. At the far end of the bar, in the corner booth where he always sat, was Marcus Reaper Kane. At 53 years old, Marcus was a mountain of a man. 6'4", 240 pounds of muscle, scars, and hard-earned wisdom. His gray-streaked beard was thick and long, his arms covered in tattoos that told stories of loss, love, and brotherhood. A faded Marine Corps tattoo on his right forearm. A memorial piece on his left shoulder with names of brothers who never made it home. His hands were scarred and calloused from 30 years of working on engines and 20 years of leading the Iron Wolves. Marcus had seen combat in Desert Storm. He'd lost friends in wars that politicians started and working men finished. He'd buried his younger sister when she was killed by a drunk driver. He'd raised his nephew alone after his brother overdosed on pills prescribed by doctors who didn't care. Life had tried to break Marcus Kane many times. It had failed, but it had also taught him something that many men never learn. That real strength isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about what you're willing to stand up for. It's about protecting those who can't protect themselves. It's about being the shield when the world becomes a weapon. Marcus had started the Iron Wolves 20 years ago with that exact principle. They weren't a gang. They didn't sell drugs or run illegal operations. They were a brotherhood of men and women who believed in loyalty, honor, and helping their community when no one else would. They escorted women who'd been abused to safe houses. They stood guard at veteran funerals when hate groups threatened to protest. They rebuilt homes after floods and fires. They delivered Christmas presents to foster kids. They were the ones who showed up when everyone else looked away. And now, as Marcus watched that small boy collapse onto the floor of his bar, something ancient and primal stirred in his chest. It was the same feeling he'd had when he saw his first combat, when he held his dying friend in the desert, when he pulled a family from a burning car on the highway. It was rage, pure, controlled, righteous rage. But beneath that rage was something even more powerful, an unshakable sense of duty. Marcus stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. The sound was like a gunshot in the silence. Every member of the Iron Wolves watched him, waiting for the signal, waiting for their leader to tell them what to do. He walked toward the boy with heavy, deliberate steps, his boots echoing in the stillness. When he reached the child, Marcus knelt down, his knees cracking slightly, and he gently placed one massive hand on the boy's shaking shoulder. "Hey, son," Marcus said softly, his deep voice like distant thunder. "Look at me." The boy's good eye opened, still streaming with tears, and he looked up at this giant of a man kneeling before him. "What's your name?" Marcus asked. The boy's voice was barely audible. Tommy. Tommy Richardson." "Tommy," Marcus repeated, nodding slowly. "That's a strong name. You know what you just did, Tommy? You ran here asking for help. That took more courage than most grown men have. You did good." Tommy's bottom lip trembled. "He said he'd kill me if I told anyone. He said nobody would believe me. He said I deserved it." Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but his festive voice remained calm. "Tommy, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Are you listening?" The boy nodded. "You didn't deserve any of this. Not 1 second of it. You hear me? This is not your fault. And your father lied to you about one more thing. People do believe you. I believe you. Every single person in this room believes you. And we're going to help you. I promise you that on my life." One of the club members, a woman named Sarah Hawk Martinez, a former Army medic with sharp eyes and a gentle touch, brought over a first aid kit and a cold Coke. She knelt beside Tommy and spoke softly. "Hey, sweetheart. My name's Sarah. I'm just going to look at your eye. Okay? I'm not going to hurt you. I promise." Tommy nodded weakly as Sarah carefully examined his injuries. Her face remained calm, but Marcus saw her hands clench slightly, the only sign of the fury building inside her. As Sarah worked, Marcus sat cross-legged on the floor beside Tommy, making himself less intimidating. "Tommy, can you tell me what happened? Take your time. Nobody's rushing you." Tommy took a shaky breath and began to speak, his words tumbling out between sobs. My mom died 2 years ago. Cancer. After that, Dad started drinking. At first, he was just sad all the time. But then he got angry. Really angry. He'd yell at me for everything. For not cleaning right. For being too loud. For reminding him of Mom. Tommy wiped his nose with the back of his hand, and someone handed him a napkin. Then he started hitting me. Just slaps at first. But it got worse. Yesterday, I spilled juice on the carpet, and he punched me in the face. Told me I was worthless. Told me Mom would be ashamed of me. The boy's voice broke completely. But I didn't mean to spill it. I didn't mean to. I just wanted him to love me again like he used to. Several of the bikers looked away, some wiping their own eyes. These were men and women who'd seen war, poverty, addiction, and loss. But there was something about a child's broken innocence that cut deeper than any wound they'd ever received. Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. "Where's your father now, Tommy?" "Home. Passed out on the couch. He drank a whole bottle and fell asleep. That's when I ran. I ran as fast as I could. I didn't know where to go. I just saw the motorcycles and I remembered my uncle used to say bikers are tough, but they're good people. So I came here. Marcus nodded slowly, his mind already working through the situation. Your uncle was right, son. What's your address? Tommy gave him the address, a house less than 2 miles away, right here in town. Sarah finished bandaging a cut on Tommy's arm and handed him the Coke. You're very brave, Tommy. Braver than you know. Marcus stood up and turned to face his club. Every single member was watching him with the same expression. Ready, waiting, loyal. Church, Marcus said simply. Now, in biker culture, church means a club meeting, a sacred time, when brothers and sisters gather to make decisions that affect the whole family. Marcus led the way to a back room where a long wooden table sat surrounded by chairs. Tommy stayed in the main bar with Sarah and 2 other members who were keeping him comfortable and safe. Inside the room, 20 of the club's core members stood around the table. Marcus didn't sit. He stood at the head, hands flat on the wood, his expression carved from stone. You all saw what just walked through our door, he began, his voice low and controlled. An 8-year-old boy, beaten, terrified, asking us for help because he has nobody else. He paused, letting that sink in. His name is Tommy Richardson. His father is David Richardson. Some of you might know him. Works at the lumber yard. Lost his wife 2 years ago and started drinking. Now he's taking his pain out on his kid, a man named Frank Diesel Cooper, a hulking mechanic with a graying ponytail, spoke up. I know David. Used to be a decent guy, before his wife passed. But if he's beating his kid, Diesel's voice turned to gravel. Decent's off the table. Marcus nodded. Here's what we know. Tommy says his father is passed out drunk at home right now. The boy's got a black eye, cuts, bruises, God knows what else we can't see. He's terrified. And he came to us. Another member, James Preacher, Williams, an ex-chaplain who'd found his way to the club after leaving the church, spoke quietly. The boy came to us because he believed we'd help. That means something. That means we have a responsibility. Damn right we do, said Maria Blaze Rodriguez, a woman with burn scars on her arms from pulling her own children from a house fire years ago. So, what's the play, Reaper? Marcus straightened up. We call the police. We do this by the book. But we also make sure that boy is never in danger again. We don't take the law into our own hands, but we make it crystal clear that Tommy Richardson is under our protection now and forever. He looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes. I'm calling every chapter within 100 miles. I want every Iron Wolf who can ride to be at that house when the police arrive. I want David Richardson to understand that the world is watching him now. I want him to know that if he ever lays a hand on that boy again, he won't just answer to the law, he'll answer to us. And the boy? Diesel asked. We make sure he's placed somewhere safe. Foster care, family, wherever, but we follow up. We check on him. We make sure he's okay. He's packed now. That means he's family. There was a moment of heavy silence, and then Preacher spoke, his voice thick with emotion. I've been a lot of things in my life, soldier, chaplain, biker. But being a shield for a kid who has nothing? That's the most righteous thing I'll ever do. Amen, Maria whispered. Marcus pulled out his phone. I'm making the calls. Diesel, you coordinate with the other chapters. Preacher, you get in touch with Child Protective Services. We have contacts there. Maria, stay with Sarah and keep Tommy comfortable. Everyone else, gear up. We ride in 30 minutes. The room erupted into motion. Phones came out. Texts flew. Within minutes, the word was spreading like wildfire through every Iron Wolves chapter in the region. Marcus stood outside the bar, phone pressed to his ear, making call after call. Steel City chapter? This is Reaper. We've got a situation. 8-year-old boy, abuse victim, needs protection. I need every rider you've got at 47 Maple Street in 30 minutes. Yeah, every single one. This is what we do, brother. This is why we exist. The response was immediate and overwhelming. From Steel City, we'll have 15 bikes there. From Riverside, 20 riders, 10 minutes out. From North Point, we're rolling now, 17 strong. From Lakeside, count us in, 12 bikes. By the time Marcus finished making calls, he had commitments for over 100 riders, 100 motorcycles, 100 iron wolves, all coming to make one simple statement. We protect our own, and this boy is ours now. Inside the bar, Tommy sat at a table with Sarah, sipping his Coke and eating a burger someone had made for him. His swollen eye was bandaged, and for the first time in months, he felt something he'd almost forgotten. Safe. Sarah smiled at him gently. You doing okay, sweetheart? Tommy nodded, his voice small. Are they really going to help me? Tommy, Sarah said, taking his small hand in hers. You see all these people here? Every single one of them would walk through fire for you. You're not alone anymore. You're family now. Tears welled up in Tommy's good eye again. But this time, they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of relief. 30 minutes later, the parking lot of Blackstone Bar looked like something out of a movie. Motorcycles stretched in every direction. Harleys, Indians, Triumphs, choppers, cruisers, all gleaming in the fading sunlight. The air vibrated with the deep rumble of 100 engines idling in unison, a sound like distant thunder rolling across the earth. Men and women in leather vests stood beside their bikes, arms crossed, faces set in stone. These weren't actors. These weren't weekend riders, playing dress-up. These were real people. Mechanics, nurses, veterans, construction workers, teachers, who dropped everything the moment they heard a child needed help. Marcus stood at the front, Tommy sitting behind him on his bike, wearing a helmet that was way too big for him, but made him feel like a warrior. Marcus turned around slightly. You ready, son? Tommy's voice was muffled by the helmet but filled with wonder. Yeah. Marcus nodded to Diesel, who raised his fist in the air and shouted, Iron Wolves. The response was deafening. Ride or die. And then they moved. 100 motorcycles rolled out of that parking lot in formation, engines roaring like a pride of mechanical lions. The sound was overwhelming, powerful, primal. A symphony of steel and fury and righteous purpose. People on the sidewalks stopped and stared. Car drivers pulled over. Windows opened as families looked out to see the massive convoy rolling through their small town. But this wasn't a show. This wasn't for attention or glory. This was a promise being kept. Tommy held onto Marcus's vest tightly, and despite everything he'd been through, despite the pain and the fear, he felt something rising in his chest. Hope. 47 Maple Street was a small, run-down house with peeling paint and an overgrown yard. A rusted pickup truck sat in the driveway, and the living room curtains were drawn tight. When the first wave of motorcycles arrived, the streets seemed to tremble. One by one, they pulled up, lining both sides of the street, filling the entire block with chrome and leather and iron resolve. Engines shut off in sequence, and then there was silence, heavy, expectant, powerful silence. Marcus dismounted first, helping Tommy down gently. Sarah came forward immediately, taking Tommy's hand. You stay with me, okay? She said softly. Tommy nodded, but he didn't take his eyes off the house. That was where the monster lived. That was where the pain came from. But now, standing behind an army of protectors, the house didn't look so scary anymore. Marcus pulled out his phone and called 911. This is Marcus Kane. I'm at 47 Maple Street. I'm here with a child named Tommy Richardson who has reported severe physical abuse by his father, David Richardson. The father is currently inside the residence. We need police and child protective services here immediately. We'll wait. Within 5 minutes, 2 police cruisers arrived, lights flashing. Officers stepped out, their eyes widening at the sight before them. Over 100 bikers standing in perfect formation, silent and still as statues. The lead officer, Sergeant Mike Torres, a man in his 40s who'd grown up in this town, approached Marcus cautiously. Marcus? What's going on here? Marcus gestured toward Tommy. Sergeant Torres, this is Tommy Richardson. About an hour ago, he ran into my bar with a black eye, cuts, and bruises, telling us his father has been beating him. His father, David Richardson, is inside that house right now, passed out drunk. Tommy was terrified to go home, so he came to us. Torres knelt down beside Tommy, his expression softening. "Hey, buddy. I'm Sergeant Torres. Can you tell me what happened?" Tommy's voice trembled, but he spoke clearly. "My dad hits me. A lot. Yesterday, he punched me in the face because I spilled juice. I was scared, so I ran away when he fell asleep." Torres's jaw tightened. He stood up and radioed for backup and CPS. Then he looked at Marcus. "You did the right thing calling us. But Marcus, why bring 100 riders?" Marcus's voice was calm but firm. "Because that boy needs to know he's protected. And because David Richardson needs to understand that the world is watching him now. We're not here to cause trouble, Sergeant. We're here to make sure justice is done, and that boy is never hurt again." Torres nodded slowly. He'd known Marcus for years, knew the Iron Wolves weren't troublemakers, knew they'd done more good for this community than most people realized. "All right, but let us handle this. You all stay out here. Wouldn't have it any other way," Marcus replied. Sergeant Torres and 2 other officers approached the house. They knocked hard on the door. "Police! David Richardson! Open the door." There was no response at first. Then, shuffling footsteps. The door opened to reveal a disheveled man in his late 30s, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, reeking of alcohol. David Richardson squinted at the officers in confusion. "What the hell do you want?" "Mr. Richardson, we need to talk to you about your son, Tommy." David's expression changed instantly, panic, then anger. "Where is he? That little brat ran off again?" "When I find him, Mr. Richardson," Torres interrupted, his voice hard as steel. "Your son came to us with serious allegations of abuse. He has visible injuries consistent with assault. We're taking him into protective custody, and you're under arrest." David's face turned red. "You can't do that. He's my son. He's a liar. He's just trying to get attention because you've been beating him?" Torres finished coldly. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." As the officers moved to arrest him, David finally looked past them to the street beyond. His face went white. The entire block was filled with motorcycles and bikers, all standing in perfect silence, all watching him with eyes that promised consequences if he ever went near that boy again. David Richardson, the man who'd terrorized his own child, who'd used his size and strength to hurt someone small and helpless, suddenly felt very, very small himself. What is this?" he stammered. Marcus stepped forward, stopping at the property line. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply spoke in a voice that carried absolute authority. "This is a reminder, David. Tommy Richardson is under our protection now. The law will handle you. But if you ever, and I mean try to hurt that boy again, if you contact him, if you come near him, if you so much as think about him, you'll answer to us. And trust me when I say, you don't want that." David was handcuffed and placed in the back of a police cruiser, his protests fading into pathetic whimpers. A CPS worker arrived moments later, a kind-faced woman named Janet who'd worked with the Iron Wolves before on similar cases. She knelt beside Tommy. "Hi, Tommy. My name is Janet. I'm going to make sure you're safe now. We're going to find you a good place to stay, okay?" Tommy nodded, but then he looked up at Marcus. Will I see you again?" Marcus knelt down, placing both hands on the boy's shoulders. "Tommy, you're Iron Wolves now. That means you're family. We're going to check on you all the time. We're going to make sure you're safe, that you have what you need, and that you're happy. I promise you that." Tommy threw his small arms around Marcus's neck and sobbed. Not from pain this time, but from gratitude, from relief, from finally feeling protected. Marcus held him gently, this massive, scarred warrior cradling a broken child with the tenderness of a father. "You're safe now, son," Marcus whispered. "You're safe." David Richardson was charged with multiple counts of child abuse and assault. The evidence was overwhelming. Tommy's injuries, medical reports, witness statements. He was convicted and sentenced to 5 years in prison, with a restraining order that would keep him away from Tommy permanently. Tommy was placed with a foster family, a kind couple who'd been thoroughly vetted by both CPS and, quietly, by the Iron Wolves themselves. They lived on a small farm outside town, had two other foster children, and welcomed Tommy with open arms. But the story didn't end there. Every Sunday, without fail, Marcus and several members of the Iron Wolves would ride out to visit Tommy. They'd help with chores, play catch, teach him how to fix motorcycles, and just be there, a constant reminder that he was loved, protected, and valued. On Tommy's 9th birthday, the Iron Wolves threw him a party at Blackstone Bar. The entire place was decorated with balloons and streamers. There was cake, presents, and more importantly, there were 50 people who genuinely cared about him. When it came time to blow out the candles, Tommy stood on a chair, looked around at all the faces smiling at him, and said in a clear, strong voice, "I wish for all kids who are scared to find someone like you." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Word of what the Iron Wolves had done spread throughout the town and beyond. Local news picked up the story, not focusing on the spectacle of 100 motorcycles, but on the message that ordinary people had stepped up to protect a child when he needed it most. The Iron Wolves started receiving calls from other communities, from other children, from desperate parents and teachers who knew of abuse situations but didn't know how to help. Marcus and his club started working more formally with local law enforcement and CPS, creating a network of protection for vulnerable children. They trained members in recognizing signs of abuse. They raised money for safe houses and counseling services. They became what they'd always been meant to be, guardians. The police sergeant, Mike Torres, later said in an interview, "When I arrived at that scene and saw 100 bikers standing there, I didn't know what to expect. But what I found was a group of people who cared more about one child's safety than their own reputation. They could have handled it differently. They could have caused violence. But they did it right. They called us. They stayed peaceful, and they made sure that boy knew he was protected. That's not what society expects from bikers, but maybe it's time we changed our expectations." 3 years later, Tommy Richardson was 11 years old. He was thriving in his foster home, getting good grades, playing Little League baseball, and volunteering at the local animal shelter. But every Sunday, without fail, he'd wait by the window for the sound he'd come to love more than any other, the rumble of motorcycles. Marcus would pull up, now 56 years old, his beard more gray than black, but his eyes still sharp and kind. Tommy would run out, and Marcus would lift him up into a bear hug. "How's my little brother doing?" Marcus would ask. "Good," Tommy would always reply. "Real good." One Sunday, as they sat together working on Marcus's bike, Tommy asked a question he'd been holding on to for a long time. "Marcus, why did you help me that day? You didn't know me. I was just some random kid." Marcus stopped what he was doing and looked at the boy, no longer the terrified, broken child who'd stumbled into his bar, but a growing young man with confidence and hope in his eyes. "Tommy, you weren't random. You were a kid who needed help, and that's all that mattered." See, a lot of people think strength is about how tough you are, how big you are, how much you can lift, or how hard you can fight. But that's not real strength. He placed a greasy hand on Tommy's shoulder. Real strength is using whatever power you have, whether it's your size, your voice, your club, your reputation, to protect people who can't protect themselves. Real strength is being kind when the world is cruel. Real strength is standing up when everyone else looks away. That's what the Iron Wolves believe. That's what I believe. And that's what you did that day, too. Tommy looked confused. "What did I do?" "You were brave enough to ask for help. That takes more courage than anything. And you reminded all of us why we wear these patches, why we ride together, why we call each other family. You reminded us what matters." Tommy was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "When I grow up, I want to be like you." Marcus smiled. "Kid, you already are." The sun was setting over Blackstone Bar as dozens of motorcycles pulled into the parking lot for the weekly club meeting. But before they went inside, they all stopped. There, hanging above the door, was a new sign. It read, "Blackstone Bar, home of the Iron Wolves MC, where the lost find family." And beneath it, a smaller plaque. In honor of Tommy Richardson, who taught us what true courage looks like, Marcus stood looking at it, surrounded by his brothers and sisters in leather. And he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Because they had done what they'd set out to do. They had protected someone who couldn't protect himself. They had been the shield when the world became a weapon. They had been the family when there was none. And that, more than any trophy or recognition or news story, was what mattered. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that there are still good people in this world who stand up for what's right, then please hit that like button, subscribe to this channel. Share this video with everyone you know. Because stories like this need to be told. Because kindness, courage, and compassion deserve to be celebrated. Because somewhere out there, right now, there's another child who needs help. And maybe, just maybe, your sharing this video will inspire someone to be that help. Tell us in the comments. Have you ever witnessed someone standing up for someone who couldn't defend themselves? What did it teach you? We want to hear your stories. And remember, real heroes don't wear capes. Sometimes they wear leather. Sometimes they ride motorcycles. Sometimes they're the people society judges unfairly. But they all have one thing in common. They refuse to look away when someone needs help. Be that person. Be the shield. Be the hope. Because that's what real strength looks like. The camera fades to black, then shows a final shot. Tommy, now a teenager, standing next to Marcus in front of a motorcycle, both of them smiling. Tommy is wearing his own leather vest, not full Iron Wolves colors, but an honorary patch that reads, "Protected by Iron Wolves, Forever Family." Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.